And today we've got a special treat for you because we've got the Africa Trade Fund. I believe it's Abu Fal, who will be providing a presentation to us. We've got about an hour and a half or so, I believe, to spend together. So between the presentation and also any comments or questions that you may have. So I think without further ado, I will hand it over to Abu for the presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Valerie. Can you all hear me?
I can, yes. Everybody else,
Excellent.
Nobody's having an issue? Okay, fantastic. Please go on.
Okay, cool. Thank you very much. And thanks for participating at this Brown Bag series. Today I'll be talking about the Africa Trade Fund, which is managed by the Trade and Investment Climate Division, PITD2. So as rightly stated, my name is Abu Fal and I'm a trade facilitation officer and also coordinating the AfTRA Fund. So just briefly, the content, we'll be giving an overview of the trust fund, the donors, objectives, areas of intervention, the beneficiaries, how to access the fund, the governance structure, what our performance is, the impact, just give out some examples of success stories, the team information, but also the way forward for the fund. Just briefly as an overview, so this is called the Africa Trade Fund, in short, AfTRA. I think we all like acronyms in the bank. So the short for the Africa Trade Fund is AfTRA, and it was set up in March 2012 with a single donor, which is the Canadian government, for 15 million Canadian dollars. And it was set up to, work on trade facilitation, product development and market access, but also capacity building, but also developing bank knowledge. I'll go over all of this during the presentation, but it was a 5-year fund, but we got a no cost extension in March and a non-objection to allocate the balance of funds beyond March 2020. Oops, I'm going a bit too fast. So as stated earlier, this is the one donor fund by the government of Canada, which provided 15 million Canadian dollars towards to the bank to foster trade-related activities. What is the AfTRA mission? Essentially, what we're trying to do is to improve supply side capacity and trade facilitation in our regional member countries. So it's a continent-wide initiative. And by doing so, what we're trying to accomplish is to make the African continent more integrated, both regionally and globally. We have 4 areas or 4 pillars of intervention. The first pillar is facilitating trade. Issues like making customs, ports, and one-stop border post more efficient and accessible, and easing movement of goods along trade corridors. If you've had chance to go through some of our corridors, you can appreciate sometimes the difficulties in the free movement of goods. The second pillar is to support the development of products and access to markets. We have several value chains that we've targeted, and I will talk about them later as examples. But essentially looking at how to improve SPS standards, quality standards, and also improving access to market for products for RMCs. We are also involved in building capacity for institutions like statistical institutions, like collecting data, analyzing trade gaps, and also adding value to to value chain and supporting negotiations. We are also in the area of growing the bank's knowledge. For example, we've published a number of documents like the Visa Index, the Africa Regional Index, in partnership with other institutions. This is to widen the bank's intervention and knowledge base. The eligible beneficiaries, I mean, essentially, we've targeted the regional economic communities like ECOWAS, COMESA, and so forth. And these are institutions that are concerned, obviously, with regional integration and development and trade development. We are also targeting the RMCs, so the regional member countries. Institutions or agencies, can be government agencies. We have projects, for example, managed by Ministry of Trade or Commerce in certain countries. But also private sector organizations such as industry associations, business organizations, growers associations such as cooperatives and so forth, that can also be beneficiaries of AfTRA funds. But also non-government organizations, you know, at a country or regional level, civil society organizations and community-based organizations that have, you know, credibility and that also work towards improving trade in the region or in the continent. So how do we access the trust fund? We essentially have like a checklist to see how we can add value to the projects that we deliver. The projects have to be impact-centered and results-focused. And we've had a tendency to focus on low-income countries where obviously there's a greater need for resources. We also want to make sure that there's a local regional content and partnership. Then we partner with local communities, businesses, governments, regional institutions to have a wide reach of interventions. We also respond to demand and build internal and external expertise to leverage funding. I will talk later about how much funding we've been able to leverage in addition to the AfTRA fund. And the guiding principles for AfTRA essentially is, you know, we have to be selective. We cannot do everything. The fund is focused on trade-related issues. So we focus on areas where the bank has demonstrated, you know, comparative advantage and value addition. I mean, we have skill sets within the bank, and we want to make sure that activities we support can also, you know, be targeted towards those areas. Obviously, country ownership. This has to be aligned with the REC's and RMC's trade strategies and development plans. And this can be expanded to obviously the CSPs to make sure that our interventions are aligned to the country needs, but also to the regional needs. We also want to make sure that our interventions are result focused. You know, we want to see tangible results, and all our activities focus. There's a greater emphasis on monitoring and evaluation to be able to showcase these results. Private sector development, essentially, you know, all our activities have to be, you know, private sector driven so that we can drive in economic growth. There's also a big gender dimension in all our activities. There's a mainstreaming of gender, for example, to remove barriers for women in trade and measures. Recently, there was a project in Rwanda where in the mid value chain where there's a huge woman dimension, gender dimension. Environmental sustainability, all our activities also have to be tied to obviously the bank's environmental safeguards. We don't want to do activities that endanger, biodiversity or the environment. And finally, there needs to be complementarity and partnerships. And where there is demand, we have to be able to also leverage resources from the country or beneficiaries to make sure that these activities are really, that there is a greater partnership in delivering these activities. The governance structure of the fund, this is a one donor fund and it's Canada, and they do approve the pipeline and annual work plan for the AfTRA. We have the board of directors that approve projects that are above $1 million US. We also have a technical review committee that do the final approvals of projects. We'll go through the process, but all instruments that we've developed, but all projects have to be finalized and approved by the technical review committee. And these are members from firm, from procurement, and so forth. Obviously, we have the firm, the resource mobilization and partnership development, which is at the core of all trust fund activities. And the administration of the fund is by the Trade and Investment Climate Division, so PITD2. So we are in charge of administrating, doing the project screening, monitoring and evaluation, managing the portfolio and reporting on the results of the project. So what have we accomplished so far? We got 15 million US dollars, Canadian dollars from Canada. But throughout the projects, we've been able to leverage close to 5 million Canadian dollars in addition with, countries and beneficiaries. So far, however, 98% of AfTRA resources have been committed as of July 2020. I don't know if this is good news or bad news, but essentially we don't have money to commit anymore. But when I'll talk about the way forward, hopefully there'll be light at the end of the tunnel to get more resources and continue delivering on activities. 78% of our projects are reporting as performing well as of July 2020. We just finalized our annual report. And I think there may be value in sharing this to give you more in-depth about the activities that we've done throughout the years. 64% average project disbursement rate between 2019 and mid-2020, which is quite a decent disbursement rate. We have about 15 AFDB professionals across 8 departments that manage all the AfTRA projects. They can be from PQ, transport, from PITD, from several other departments. So it's just not PITD that's managing this. We want to make sure that we have the skill sets to manage the projects based on the departments and the various areas of intervention. 18 out of the 27 projects. So we have 27 projects overall that we are managing. And so far we have 18 that are completed out of July 2020. Essentially means that we have 100% disbursements, and we also have a project completion report that is finalized or under review. And out of these 27 projects, 8 are in Pillar 1, which is trade facilitation. We have 7 in Pillar 2, product development, 8 in Pillar 3, and 4 in Pillar 4. So it's quite widespread across the various pillars. And out of the 27 projects, we have 7 that are African-wide, so these are multinational projects. We have 2 in Central Africa, 6 in East Africa, 5 in Southern Africa, and 7 in West Africa. And these projects are led by 25 institutions. So we have 7 Africa-wide institutions like COMESA, YMU, ECOWAS, 5 regional bodies, 8 government agencies, and 3 nonprofit organizations, and 2 private sector institutions or alliances. And 63% of these projects actively support MSMEs, small, medium-sized enterprises, because we've realized that this is where the need is, and there's greater need for support for small, medium enterprises. And a third of the projects, as I mentioned earlier, have a great focus on empowering women. So the gender dimension is widely acknowledged and integrated into our projects. So including 50% of country-specific projects, and 6 out of projects on developing. We have 6 out of 7 projects are focused on developing products and market access. So the impact and, and examples of successful operations. I mean, we have 27 operations, 18 completed. I cannot go over all of them, but I'll just mention a few to give you an idea. Once again, we can share the annual report. We go in depth on all these operations and the results and impact. So we have a woman, for example, a woman cross-border trade project in the Manu River Union area, Cote d'Ivoire, Guinea, Liberia, Sierra Leone. So this was a 525,000 Canadian dollar project to support 250 women traders to build a business, financial management and training in finance, in marketing skills and know-how, and also navigating through border processes. So obviously, this is done also in collaboration with border agencies like customs and so forth. We also have the West Africa Border Information Center initiative done in partnership with the Borderless Alliance, which is based in Ghana. And we've set up 3 border information centers to support traders and improve relationship between public and private sector bodies. And these border information centers are in Kidira, Diboli, the Mali-Senegal border, but also the Cote d'Ivoire, Burkina Faso border. So essentially, throughout these border information centers, traders can get on-time information, but also sort out issues, border issues with relevant institutions like agencies, customs, SPS agencies, transporters, and shippers. We've also supported the cashew industry, both in West and East Africa. So this is almost a 600,000 Canadian dollars, where we've supported 1,500 new jobs created, 70% of them women. This is a very gender-centered project with training on all areas of processing. There was also a study done on environmental mitigation measures to process cashew waste, especially for processing CNSL, the cashew nut oil. We've also have examples in Rwanda and Zambia on enabling women beekeepers to access markets with over 1,000 women beekeepers supported to access market and also improve quality standards for honey production, with a supply of over 2,000 modern beehives, for example, to improve production and processing. Similarly, in Zambia, we also have a COMESA Trading for Peace project to help improve security at more than 8 borders of the Congo, and to sensitize customs officials on gender-related issues at border within these borders. We've also published the Africa Visa Index and the Regional Integration Index. This is for the management, knowledge management pillar. These initiatives essentially show the level of integration of the continent, but also the Visa Index shows which countries offer, visa friendly or no visa entry to visitors. So these are just a few examples. I mean, once again, more details can be found in the annual report, which we can gladly share. So the team, so once again, the Secretariat is within the Trade and Investment Climate Division, so PITD2. So it's composed by myself. We have my colleague, Mr. Inye Briggs, who is a team member, and also Maria Eleanor Sales, who's a consultant who's supporting also on the trust fund management. We're essentially responsible for the strategic planning and oversight, resource mobilization, and monitoring outcomes for these activities. And we also have the task managers. These are focal points who oversee the implementation of AfTRA projects, and they're across departments. As I mentioned, they can be from PQ and several other departments, depending on the scope of the project. So what have we learned and the way forward? We've learned very early on that to manage the fund properly, we need to actually design operational instruments. We, for example, have the operational guidelines, which stipulate clearly how the fund has to be managed, how the project have to be approved, who has to approve it, the governance structure, how projects have to be supervised, and what the project cycle is. So all these instruments are very, very important to set up at the very, very beginning, so that the process can move smoothly. For the Secretariat, it's also important to have the right skill sets and recruit the people with adequate knowledge of sector issues and bank operations and project management. I mean, obviously, trust funds follow bank rules. So we want to make sure that folks who are managing the funds also understand the bank rules, can also provide oversight and support to staff that are managing the projects. Another lesson learned is also to be focused. I mean, once again, we cannot do everything. We are focused on trade-related issues. So we've narrowed the focus of our interventions in order to have greater impact on our activities. The fund has gone through calls for proposals. Over the lifetime of the project, we've had 2 calls for proposals, and I think we've received over 400 proposals. But what we've requested was detailed budget breakdowns to be during the call for proposal, but also assess the capacity and experience of the requesting department or project managers. So, I mean, we really go through diligently, the proposals to make sure that they do meet our requirements. Same thing for the screening. And the screening is actually done with a committee to make sure that it's quite wide and that we can get input from many skill sets. The project amounts have been relatively low, from 400,000 K to 800,000 K. The largest project we had was 1.4 million Canadian dollars, and obviously had to go through the board for approval on a lapse of time basis. For these projects, over time we've realized that the use of special accounts could be problematic in certain countries. So we do privilege direct payment methods, especially for consulting services, and it just allows to go much faster than the special accounts in most occasions. We also have developed a robust M&E system where we regularly report on the performance of the project. and portfolio. For example, we have a quarterly dashboard, annual report, and this just shows to our funder, the Canadians, to firm, to our department, the evolution of our project, the performance, and it allows us also to just be proactive and anticipate, on issues, on problematic projects, and be able to provide the necessary support to have a clean portfolio. So before I just go to questions, I mean, as I mentioned, I mean, 90%, 98% of the funds have been dispersed, allocated. So we are in the phase of looking for more resources, much more. We've developed some terms of references, and we are in the process. Excuse me. We are in the process of mobilizing more resources to actually support more countries and do more, probably much larger scale maybe this time. I mean, I cannot go more into the details, but essentially we think that we will be looking for a 30 million multi-donor fund to be able to support more, use our lessons learned, and see how we can provide more support to RMCs. So this is where I will stop. Thank you very much, and I'm open for questions.
Thank you very much, Abu, for that. And we will open it up for questions. So let me see. Probably the best thing for you all to do is actually try to put them into the chat function, which seems to work quite well. You can, of course, also raise your hands, but I find that the chat function probably works a little bit better this way as well. Everybody gets to read your question. So why don't we start like that? It's now 12:30, so I think we are okay on time. Let's try and spend another maybe 30 to 45 minutes together with questions. Since I don't actually see anything right now, Abu, why don't I start with the first question? And sure. The prerogative of the chair, I won't do it by chat, but it's just to ask. So we have the new sort of African free trade, African continental agreement that came into effect, I think the first of this year. So the question I guess I'd have for you is, what's the impact of an agreement like that on a fund like AfTRA? Thank you.
Should I respond now or get more questions? I cannot hear you. I'm muted.
Apologies. There is also something on the Q&A, which I didn't even know existed, but there you are. Somebody has a question on, well, can you read it? You've got access to it.
Yeah, I can read it. Yeah, I can have access to it, yeah. Okay, when fantastic. Will the fund be ready for next round?
I guess that's next round of replenishments, but in any event, why don't you take the first two questions? We can take it from there.
Sure, okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you very much. Yeah, the AFCFTA is upcoming. I mean, it's supposed to be up and running in January this year. And now PITD2 actually has already, or the bank, I would say, has already earmarked money for the CFTA. I think about $5 million US to support the secretariat of the ACFTA. What we'll do is, I mean, the next round of the AfTRA, so I mean, it doesn't really have any particular relationship with the AfTRA fund, and we haven't really supported the ACFTA in any regard with the AfTRA. But the bank overall has earmarked money, and it is actually being managed by PITD2, the money that is earmarked to support the secretariat. But this pushes me to the second question about the next round of on the next round of AfTRA. We've actually widened the scope a little bit to talk about trade and investment. So the next round of AfTRA will, I mean, the name may change, but we're going to be talking about trade and investment. As I mentioned, we have developed the terms of references. I mean, it has gone through several iterations, and we've started discussing with potential donors. I think the Italians, the Americans, but I mean, this is a process. You know, setting up a trust fund requires several processes, and we have to work with firm, obviously, to make sure that this can go through. So our hope is that 2021 we will be able to set up the next fund. As I mentioned, I mean, if we are able to leverage 30 million US dollars, that would be great, but it's going to be a multi-donor fund, and we'll be working closely with CFTA. I do not have a timeline per se. It all depends on the negotiations with the potential donors, and it has to go through a whole process of validation, signing MOUs, and so forth. So this is really a process that we will be working closely with firm, but we are hoping that we should have a firm ready by 2021, maybe second quarter, I don't know, to be honest. But our hope is that before end of 2020, we should have a new fund ready to support larger projects. So I have some other questions here, if I may.
Yes, please, Abel, do go ahead.
Yeah. So question by O'Neill, in addition to the question by Valerie on the impact of the CFTA, what are the synergies and position of comparative advantages that the bank and AfTRA could put forward so that we can be seen as a strong partners and enabler? Yeah, as I mentioned, I mean, the AfTRA fund was once again just focused on enabling trade, in the region or continent-wide. So with the new fund, essentially, as I mentioned, we're widening the scope and including investments. But if you pay attention during the presentation, one aspect is also to be able to leverage resources. So it's just not bank funds, supporting projects, but essentially what we're trying to look at is that for every single project that we support, we should be able also leverage more resources so that the projects, from the beneficiary or even some other donor maybe. But the aspect, the focus is to make sure that the bank is seen as supportive and both in terms of skills, but also funds, but also be able to attract more resources to support more projects. Boubacar, good morning and thanks for the presentation. What are the concrete improvements that you see necessary regarding the process of calls for proposals to avoid a large burden during the selection step? Yes, this is actually a very, very good question, because as I mentioned, we had 2 calls for proposals and had over 400 proposals. So that's quite a large number. And the process of, selecting and screening all these proposals takes quite a bit of time. I mean, and for what the system that we've set up is essentially making sure that we can incorporate as many staff as possible, depending on the nature of the proposals, was also the skill sets, to make sure that we can go through it swiftly. But to be honest, it's not a process that can just go quickly. I think recently we actually went through this audit process, and the process to go through the proposals can take up to 4 months. I mean, to screen, to review, to do the evaluation, and come up with the projects that the AfTRA fund could support. So yeah, it is a lengthy process. I think the internal discussions that we've had was that some of these small projects like 400,000 K, 800,000. I mean, the amount of work obviously required for small or large projects is roughly the same. So what we are trying to do is maybe for future projects to see how we can have bigger projects, maybe more than 1 million. I mean, we don't know. These are just internal discussions, but we are looking at maybe larger projects so that the process of evaluation could also be done in a much more coherent fashion, because it's very there are a lot of details in evaluating all these projects. Maybe by having bigger projects, we can narrow down the number of proposals. But these are just internal discussions that we're having, and obviously we are happy to learn more and also collaborate with other trust funds to see how we can streamline the process and learn from them as well, in order to do this process more efficiently. Thank you very much. These are the questions that I have on the Q&A. There's any other question?
So one more question, Abu. You mentioned about broadening the suite of instruments. And first, I think you talked about actually what I thought were the governance instruments, things like guidelines and the like, and how important it is to have those at the ready so that you can start operating. Are you also going to think about the next iteration of Trust Fund, excuse me, that you will be using something other than just grants?
Yes, thanks. Yes, I mean, I've read the new trust fund policy, which suggests that beyond just grants, we can go to loans and so forth. I mean, frankly speaking, internally, we haven't looked at loans yet. This is discussion that will come up with the management to see if integrating loans and so forth is pertinent. But it also depends on the demand. I mean, so far, all the projects that we've supported are more geared toward grant specific activities. But I mean, I think it's a bit premature for me to say yes, we can include loans and so forth. But this is definitely something that will raise in our internal discussions, and also discussions with you firm to see how, if it's pertinent and how we can do it. Because I mean, our department or division is not actually specialized in managing loans, because we do mostly non-sovereign operations. And so this is, I mean, if this comes up, I mean, we'll definitely need a lot of support from you guys, see how we can integrate it. But so far it's just been grants. But definitely I will raise it with management in our discussions and see how we will take it from there.
No, thanks very much, Abu. I mean, obviously, whether or not you expand into something other than grants, and this can be reimbursable grants, they can be loans and equity and the like, really depends on the ability of your beneficiary to support something other than grants, right? And so it isn't something which is absolutely appropriate, let's say, for every fund. But since I did hear you talk about, I guess, evolving instruments, I simply wanted to kind of pick your brain on, what that would look like. It's clear, that if this is going to continue along kind of the same lines, which is really soft support to infrastructure, generally speaking, if you will, trade and investment, that those things, unless you package something along with a project which itself has an internal rate of return and the like, you know, on their own, these are typically not activities that generate returns, right?
Yeah.
But they're hugely important for the proper functioning of your infrastructure. So I think we'll have to, you know, it'll have to be, I think, be the subject of deliberate and thinking as to whether or not you do something other than grants. But on the other side is that donors, in terms of sustainability of their own funds and funding, I think that's really where they, you know, want to see that the funds are able at least to plow back some returns into the fund if, you know, they can find a beneficiary that can support something other than grants.
Okay. No, I think we'll definitely, go ahead.
No, looking, I think also in the meanwhile, I think another question came up. I see, yes, another question might have come up as well. Yeah.
Yes, on the Q&A. Said not a question, but this was very insightful session for me. Operationalizing the AfCFTA is the potential game changer for the trade and investment environment in Africa, as well as private sector development in Africa. I mean, it's a comment, but yeah, I mean, as I mentioned, our division is already heavily involved in supporting, you know, the AfCFTA, and it falls right within our mandate. Now, one thing that we have to look at is also, you know, besides the support that we've initially provided to the AfCFTA Secretariat, we've been thinking internally at, you know, how to support also the private sector to take advantage of the AfCFTA, because at the end of the day, it's the private sector who actually trades. I mean, the governments and so forth just set up the right policies. So these are internal discussions that we are having to find out how we can really support the private sector to really, you know, take advantage of the AfCFTA. And this is maybe something that, you know, where the fund can also intervene, you know. But once again, it's a bit premature, I mean, to say exactly what's going to happen. But these are ideas that we will take into account to make sure that all stakeholders involved in the AfCFTA find the right avenue and path to make sure that you know, we can make this happen, continent-wide free trade agreement eventually that benefit the private sector as well.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. There's another one. All right. I guess guys are waking up. You must have eaten or had coffee or something, the audience here. That's good. Go ahead.
Well, actually, these are just comments. I see a comment from the VP, I think. Yes. It's not a question. I think the VP is signaling that he's around. So I don't have questions per se in the Q&A. Maybe any participant?
Let me see.
Oh, there's another one. There's another question. A group of 500 poor folks have been allocated land and they have fought for a long time. They want to do commercial housing project in line with government housing policy. They have no capital to start off the process. Can the fund support class houses? Well, actually, I mean, as I mentioned, the AfTRA is very focused on trade. So I don't think we can cater for this particular question. I don't know exactly how to respond to this to this question, to be honest. But yeah, I mean, we are not focused on housing, but I think this is an area where another department of the bank may give advice, but from our point of view, we do not really focus on this. Oh yes, I see the VP. Okay, not the comment on operationalizing other game changers. So it was a VP actually. I didn't. Yes. So thank you very much, VP, for the comment. And I mean, we're very conversant with the AFC FTA. We think, and we think that yeah, it's definitely a new paradigm for changing trade in Africa in general. And I think we just did actually a webinar on the ACFTA and the COVID, and seeing the COVID as a catalyst for really changing the paradigms for Africa's development, especially for trade. So I think PITD and PITD2, and of course other departments such as RDRI. I mean, we are all really conversant and aware of the importance of the ACFTA, and we will definitely make sure that we do coordinate closely, both internally but also externally. But once again, as I mentioned, we have to also look at the ACFTA from the angle of the private sector, because at the end of the day, they will be the one trading, and we have to make sure that they do receive the adequate support to make sure that they could trade freely within the continent. We've seen results within regions, some issues on the soft infrastructural issues. Now we have a much bigger fish with the continent. So we have to make sure that the soft infrastructural issues are dealt with to drive swift trade. So that's definitely something that's, I think, will be at the core of our activities for PITD2. Any other questions? I do not see. I do not see any other question on the Q&A.
All right, I don't see either. Let me see. Sure, somebody put something there. Well, it's just a question about the fact that you'll have to work to integrate la dimension immatérielle, or, well, the reforms into your work related to access to markets. Okay, yes. But I think it was just a comment. That's all. Right. All right, I think you've been a very kind, very orderly audience. So I'll say a great big thank you for that. Typically, I think those who participated in these in years gone by knew that we actually had a lunch served during these brown bags. And so our apologies for not being able to do that for you all. I think it was a much more welcoming, much more convivial atmosphere, but this too shall pass, hopefully. And we'll come back to the time we can actually share lunches and get to see people. But meanwhile, I thank you for your continued interest in these brown bag sessions. Marco, did you raise your hand? I think Marco Yamaguchi. Do you want to say something, Marco? All right, I take that as a no. So in any event, thank you very much to this. We've got a comment from Belinda. I think it's just also saying thank you to the entire team. For us, from where we sit, we've been very grateful to Canada for their support, but obviously we need to expand this and make it into a bigger, more impactful fund. And so we're keen also to work with you to turn this into a multi-donor trust fund with a variety of donors who are interested in this type of work. So Abu, thank you very much for the presentation. Thanks for your time. Thanks to all the participants. Wish you a good rest of the afternoon, and we will see you at the next brown bag session.